Right, here we go. Coalition talk. Last week, the Electoral Commission revealed the final list of the 70 councils where no party has an outright majority in some of South Africa's 257 municipalities. So as municipal councils are expected to hold the first meeting with the assistance of the Electoral Commission, it will be 14 days after the names were gazetted. Political parties in hung municipalities are forced to forge some form of a working arrangement. So over the weekend, EFF leader Julius Malema came up with some suggestions on how to govern three of South Africa's most contested metros. Now, Malema revealed that during coalition talks, his party suggested that the EFF should be given Tshwane to govern, while the ANC takes Ekurhuleni and ActionSA should be left to run the City of Joburg. That's their solution. Political analyst Ongama Mtimka, based at the Department of History and Political Studies Faculty of Arts at the Nelson Mandela University, joins us to talk a bit more about this. Ongama, welcome. Good to have you.
Good morning, Leanne, and your viewers. Thank you for having me.
So just in a nutshell, I mean, in the introduction, I spoke about the EFF stance, not a secret. This is what they've been talking to. What do you think of this solution of theirs?
First of all, it's interesting to note that voters in South Africa are moving away from the system of party dominance in terms of who is preferred to govern the country. And therefore, political parties are finding themselves in this situation. By the way, they seem to be of the view that an election run would deliver something different than this outcome. And there's something that they're not learning about where voters find themselves. They're not in a position to trust political parties anymore to the extent that they would confer an outright majority in these areas where there have been hung councils. So my view is that we're going to see more and more municipalities that fall into coalitions in future, as well as provinces, actually, when it comes to national government elections. So the only challenge with the position that political parties are holding is that it's too party-centric. So the arrangement that Julius Malema is making is sort of a good arrangement if you look at it in terms of attempting to simplify the complexities that they are facing. But the problem with it is its party-centeredness, and also the assumption that, these constituting local government election has got to all the time be competitive, when the system itself, in terms of the law, allows not just this party-centric approach, but also an approach like an executive committee system, in terms of which you simply repeat the makeup of seats at the level of the executive. You repeat at the level of executive leadership the same makeup of seats that is there in the council. Because unlike national and provincial government, executive power in municipalities is not separated from the council where legislation or bylaws are made.
Yeah. One of the things, and a lot of people have been talking to the idea of the EFF and saying, at least you can actually hold people accountable. You know that if the EFF are in control, that they are the ones you point fingers at. If it's the ANC, you point fingers at them. But when it is this coalition government, it's very hard to almost hold somebody accountable. And this is the way that Julius Malema was speaking from when the elections were still taking place when it came to coalition talks. Because in the past, we've seen the problems that arise out of coalition governments. So do you think he may have a point that when they enter into these talks, that there is this kind of decision that is made, that there is one ultimate leader of them, or is that unfair against the voter?
Well, its fundamental flaw, this proposal, is the view that you can create by appearance what otherwise is a different picture in reality. If the EFF, if they do this arrangement that they are talking about, the fact of the matter would be that whichever party is governing in one municipality will be operating on leveraged power, which means that anyway, the effect of its governance will be that of a coalition environment, and it would not be able to execute the policies that it wanted as far as its manifesto is concerned, because of the counterbalancing effect of all the other parties in the rest of the 3 municipalities. What you will find, in fact, is that there would be a conflation of issues across municipalities, where you find that deadlocks in one municipality are translated into others because of the arrangement like that. My view is that political parties do not need to set up coalitions that outfox one another in municipalities where it's impossible, or doing so would result in a government that has to continue to look over its back. So if they dropped the idea of party-centeredness for a change only in these municipalities, and drop the executive mayoral system and opt for an executive committee system, what you will find is that the mayoral and deputy mayoral position becomes a ceremonious role of coordination role, where the members of the mayoral committee come from all the parties represented in council in proportional terms mainly, or sometimes they can negotiate. Say, for example, in Johannesburg, say to the ANC, you've got more seats, but you are not in a winning coalition, and therefore, in an executive committee system, we wouldn't want to go purely proportional representation. We would want to give you so many seats in the mayoral executive, whereas the rest get to be taken by other political parties. In that way, you will have a situation where all parties in council are represented in the executive committee, and an executive committee system delegates the executive leadership to each head of the executive political head of a portfolio, and not the executive mayor, who then devolves those powers into their mayoral committee at their own pleasure.
Yeah.
And lastly, you could have in the committees different whips that come from the smaller parties, among other things, and you would have an accountable, a lot more accountable political system. It's more complex because you are not going to have political parties now claim victories for the stability or for service delivery, but that's the kind of humility that voters request from politicians in these municipalities, where it's basically impossible to constitute a coalition that will be sustainable for 5 years.
Yeah. So you did a write-up, and you spoke about coalitions and the whole setup. But in this write-up, you raise a very, very important point, that political parties that are considering coalitions should also consider the preferences of voters and follow them and not work against them. So what has been your observation so far in these party talks out there?
Sure. So polarizing politics is the main issue currently, in terms of which people see the split votes as evidence of a divided voter base. So, for example, if the two major parties in an election, in a city, are the Democratic Alliance and the ANC, political parties or politicians are seeing that as evidence of division. And my view is that a paradigm shift could actually reframe how they see the two main parties to be, in fact, evidence of the most liked parties in that municipality. And as such, be more open to actually give expression to the fact that voters prefer these two main rival parties, and therefore constitute an executive committee system, or a government that is inclusive of the two main rivals, and then draws on or proportionally on the rest of the parties represented in council. And I'm not saying, Leanne, this is what the parties should do everywhere. This is what they should consider doing in those municipalities like Tshwane, Joburg, Nelson Mandela Bay, where it's proving to be difficult to constitute a coalition that's going to be sustainable. They are excited now because of the energy of elections at the prospect of edging it just above 50% to constitute a coalition. But you can't repeat the same mistake and hope for different results. They did this in Tshwane, in Nelson Mandela Bay, and elsewhere with better margins, by the way, in 2016. Now they are doing, and those coalition governments could not last 5 years. In fact, 2 years was the longest they could last. Now they want to repeat the same thing with less margins. I mean, to me, it doesn't make sense.
No, certainly. I mean, another interesting fact is that political parties seem to be talking among themselves. But my question to you is, do parties actually go back to constituencies to get their mandate, or decisions are made on their toes out of absolute and utter desperation?
Well, the reason why we have representative democracy is so that representatives could actually, interpret the mandate and actually act and lead. I see ActionSA has had a participatory approach, which is quite commendable, but it's impossible to be done by all the parties. Some of them are consulting within their own structures. Others are interpreting the mandate in the way that they see best. And I think that both approaches are acceptable in a system of representative democracy.
Yeah. Just, Ongama, as we start wrapping up, because, I mean, there are some political parties that are still sticking their stake into the ground and saying they will not work with this one, that one will not work with this one. I mean, you've got Herman Mashaba, basically, as we know, saying that, he will not work with the ANC, flatly refusing to. And also, I mean, Mbalula, this is an interesting one. Fikile Mbalula's statement saying that the ANC is not desperate and it is willing to sit in opposition benches. So give me your view on some of the comments that are being made during these conversations.
I think the comments are understandable. My view has been that the idealistic positions held by the parties in certain municipalities can actually succumb to the practical realities of specific municipalities. What is going to be a problem for nuanced, localized political arrangements is going to be the overbearing role that national leaders feel they should have on the process. You will find that in different local municipalities, relationships are warm across the political spectrum, so much so that they could pave the way for more localized arrangements in terms of which some of the worst rivals can actually, at a local level, want to work together. What will preclude that are the idealistic positions held by the national leaders. And I think that there should be a degree of autonomy given to local players who know best their situation and can actually come up with more workable arrangements based on their memory of the recent 5 years in governing in coalitions or working across the political divide in their own localized settings.
All right, we'll leave it there. The deadline is looming. When is that deadline again? I'm losing count. When do they have to reach this?
It seems to be Thursday, if my memory serves me
Thursday.
well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's it. Time is flying. So yeah, Thursday sounds about right. Ongama, thanks for talking to us. It's going to be a very interesting couple of days. Political analyst Ongama Mtimka, based at the Department of History and Political Studies Faculty at the Arts at Nelson Mandela University, talking to us about coalitions. The deadline is coming up, and it's this Thursday. We've got to have some decisions.